Yes, 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 yes. Who is back? You guys obviously are. Okay, douchebag minute is over. How's everybody doing? I'm okay. Just did a nice little ride, got lost, found my way out, discovered these nice little chin-up bars behind me, pulled a few. And now I wanted to take a minute, rest, relax, post a video about another important thing that I could follow up on from the previous one, which was another video on identification. And this time, obviously, if you heard of my 3 I's principle: identify, implement, and iterate. So we're on the second one again. And what's there to be said about implementation? So on identification, you know, it is possible to identify the positives that you want to incorporate and the negatives that you want to minimize, reduce, and get rid of as much as you can. But I never want to say isolate because it is too hard, too much of an effort, and because the possibility of completely eradicating something like that that's almost innate is so low, you might end up discouraging yourself for no reason, because you're going to be like, well, I can't get rid of this, so what's the point of even trying, right? So let's be practical about some of these things. And I wanted to say that you don't have to worry about it all that much. Yeah, so the implementation part now, that can also have different angles. So usually, like, the obvious way of looking at it is that you want to implement an idea or an aspect, something that you've identified. But how do you implement it, right? Like, how do you take something that you previously didn't have or you're not familiar with using and start internalizing? Because I wouldn't say that implementation and internalization are too far apart from each other. So you want to implement some things, like, say, a new habit, right? I like to kind of bash these books and videos that mimic, like, the habits of successful people and their routines and this kind of stuff, because that alone, that is a wishful thinking type of shortcut, right? I've kind of gone over this a bit earlier, but you definitely want to implement some part of that, like, for example, waking up early. So a good way to approach this is you can start a little bit less efficient, maybe as a total practice, but you can start at the end of the day, usually when you're kind of wrapping up, you've done some work or you've done something, you've obviously taken like a bunch of breaks, and you're going to start wrapping up to go to sleep, your regular sleep schedule, whenever that may be. So you probably may think like, damn, did I do something? Or you might want to reflect on your day. So that moment right there is very precious, because that means that your brain is consolidating its future projections with its present state. And so sometimes when some things are not matching, your brain might start bringing up questions like, I don't think we're on the right path here, right? Like, we're not really doing something that'll put us forward one step closer to where we want to be. So that's the time where you want to start identifying and making conscious decisions to implement things differently than what you've been doing. So this is the most critical part right here to understand, is that you're making a conscious choice to do things in the nearest future, and every time you don't do it, you should always be reminding yourself that you need to do something differently than what you've already been doing. For example, if you've decided to go on a weight loss routine, right? So at the end of the day, you're gonna have to ask yourself, like, okay, so what did I eat differently today? Okay, so I had a cucumber, that's nice. I had a little salad, great. But I still had the chocolate bars, the French toast waffles with maple syrup. I still had this, I still had that. So not much has changed if I'm being honest with myself, because if you're not honest with yourself, none of this will work. I guarantee you that much. You're just gonna keep talking to yourself. It will literally be you talking to yourself. So if you're not gonna be honest with yourself, you might as well skip this. You're wasting your time. It's kind of like going to the gym, taking a book with you, going on a treadmill, putting it on one of the slowest speeds possible and reading. Your mind will never be able to work hard enough to both balance yourself at a speed that will sustain your heart rate and burn calories, and comprehending what the hell you're reading. One of those two is going to have to go. We're just not those on that level of multitasking as a species, right? So it's the same thing here. Be honest, be humble. Humble is extremely important lesson from religions, because I've talked about sin, right? Like in my previous video about the identification part, and I said that, like, look, you can look at sin as being this like built-in mechanism for developing bad habits. It's like a natural thing, but I used like the metaphor, the religious metaphor, and here I can use the religious metaphor of humbleness as well, which I think is even more profound, if I'm being honest, because English being very fluid, a language that it is, it can convolute certain words that have radically different meaning, even in religion, and even in, what's it called, even in just, the most useful, regular terminology. So humbleness. Usually we take being humble to be a very superficial and like shitty, the shittiest part of that word, which is this fake modesty, I would say. And there's big difference between being humble and being modest. When you're being modest, like the shitty part of modest that I'm talking about right now, it's basically like this. Oh, you did so great. Oh no, stop it, I didn't do nothing. You know exactly what you're doing. You're kind of putting yourself at a higher position where like, no, I don't deserve this praise. But deep down in mind, you're like, yeah, boy. And then you're going to go home, you're going to look at yourself. I did that, eh? I fucking did that. So that is not called being humble. Even though you can definitely use the word and it will be understood correctly. But being humble here is more profound in that you're being humble, that you're being cognizant of your shortcomings. You're saying that, like, look, I am not capable of all this stuff that I want to do. I don't have it in me right now, but I'm not going to let that pride that I'm also trying to like unleash right now ruin my chances of ever getting there. Because trust me, there's a big difference between living 10 years and living 100 years. At the end, maybe not so much when it's time to die. But when you're doing it, trust me, you would rather have had more time than not. And so it's better to get really close to perfection than not even close. Just take my word for it. So, you could say, yeah, be humble is acknowledge your limitations, but do not let them dominate you. Do not let your fake and superficial modesty fool you into thinking you're humble, because sometimes there is a real choice to be made in favor of humbleness, where you're going to have to say, like, look, I'm just not that guy right now, or I'm just not that girl, I'm just not that person right now, and that's okay. I'm still going to have to give it a shot. Versus, oh no, stop it, I didn't do that. Oh, guys, come on. It's not me, I mean, yeah, okay, but like, whatever. So, enough analogies. And in terms of, let's get back to the whole implementation part. And it really gets kind of simple from here on. And you have to come to terms with doing things progressively differently. And those implementations are later on going to become your iterations. You repeating these things that you've started to implement over and over and over and over again, improving, honing, adapting, changing, improving. But without implementation, you can also think of it like insertion. Man, English is really good. It's got a lot of these words they have like convenient. They conveniently sound together, similar, but at the same time have nice similar meanings as well. So you're going to have to reconcile what you have now and what you are trying to do a week, 2 years, 3 decades from now. And it's going to take in the beginning an extremely inefficient amount of time for you to realize that you're not doing things the way you think you want to be doing them. This is where your humbleness is going to have to come in, and you're going to have to say, damn, I've been screwing up, I've been blind, I've been being lazy, I've been all sorts of things, but I'm going to take that L, I'm going to take whatever mistakes I've made, stash them in my backpack, and I'm going to have to carry that with me until they kind of just evaporate into thin air. They're no longer relevant. I'm going to get so strong that I won't feel their weight anymore. So implement new ideas. You can start at the end of the day. You can start by, usually you're probably going to be like logging off your computer, or turning off your TV, or maybe, I would say before putting the book down. So I think before you start reading and getting into another mental exercise, just start with 1 or 2 things. Definitely don't start with more than many. And just honestly ask yourself, like, what did I do today differently from yesterday, last week, and the year before that is carrying me to where I want to be next week, a year from now, and so on. You're on a spectrum, and the balance, right? If you think of that, oh my God, I forgot the people that walk the tightrope. If you kind of use that analogy, you're on the rope, but the stick is tilting both directions. You have to allow it to go a little bit to the left, a little bit right, but you're using the momentum of its sway to balance yourself. You have to keep looking back to adjust your gauge into the future, but you must not forget that you're still currently in this moment, in the present. And if you lose your footing, it's going to be extra effort to get back up. It's going to be extra effort to recalibrate yourself. You can think of balance we think of balance as a state, that you're balanced. Like, I'm just standing right here and I'm perfectly balanced, and nothing is gonna tilt me off or put me down. But balance is like an equilibrium. It's a constant adjustment. It's a constant movement. I think we're just not aware of this physically because our mind is doing it so quickly and effectively behind consciousness that we don't notice that our muscles are constantly probably contracting, tightening, loosening up, and it will really help you if you frame balance in that sense, where you're always in motion, always perpetually, synonymously keeping your feet on the ground by keeping track of the past and the future. There was a very popular book, and Eckhart Tolle, right? Like the Power of Now, I think it was called. And people really were enamored with this idea, like just being in the present, because it's kind of saying that, like, oh, we're always looking into the future, always looking into the past. And yes, overly looking into the future and dwelling on the past for too long will put you off balance, and you're basically going to keep tilting, like kind of like stumbling back, or just stumbling into the future. You want to arrive in style, okay? You want to get where you're going in style and with grace. So keep your wits about and create new habits. And implementation, ultimately the successful measurement of implementation is a new habit that you actually don't really think about too much that often. You're just iterating over. It's good to reflect on it. It's good to dwell on it. but you are not trying to do it from scratch every day. That's a definite. All right. I think that about does it. So it's a beautiful evening here. I'm gonna hop on my bike, head home. You all have a wonderful one, and try it today. Before you go to sleep, ask yourself, what have you done? What do you want to do? And how did today contribute to either one of those views? All the best.